November 14th, 1838. Deep in the shadow-thick hollows of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the mist clings to ancient oaks like the breath of ghosts, a fire burns low and deliberate. Around it, men move in silence, Cherokee warriors with faces carved by grief and defiance, and escaped slaves with scars that tell stories no tongue should have to speak. This is not a camp of refuge, this is a forge. And tonight, under a moon that has witnessed too many betrayals, they are not learning to survive. They are learning to kill. The year 1838 is one of apocalypse for the Cherokee Nation. The Trail of Tears has begun. 16,000 souls dragged westward by federal soldiers, their ancestral lands stolen by a government that signed treaties in ink and broke them in blood. But not all Cherokee walked that trail. Some vanished into the mountains, into the caves and the shadows, and they did not go alone. Escaped slaves, men and women who fled the plantations of Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, found sanctuary among these warriors. And in that sanctuary an alliance was born, not out of sentiment, out of necessity, out of shared rage. The slavers and the soldiers served the same masters. So the Cherokee taught the runaways what they knew: how to move without sound, how to strike without warning, how to turn the wilderness itself into a weapon. This is the story they buried, the story that terrifies empires, the story of men who refuse to be erased. You need to understand something before we go further. What you're about to hear is not taught in schools. It's not carved into monuments or celebrated in textbooks. It was hidden deliberately. Because the alliance between the Cherokee and escaped slaves was too dangerous to acknowledge. It threatened the very foundation of a system built on stolen land and stolen lives. If you're ready to see history without the sanitization, without the lies of omission, then stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, because this story has layers most will never dig into. Drop a comment if you've ever heard even a whisper of this before. Now, let me take you back to the mountains, suggests to the fire, to the night where legends were not born but forged in blood and brotherhood. The man they called Solly sits closest to the flame, his face half lit, half shadow. He is not old, but his eyes carry the weight of 1,000 burials. His hands rest on his knees, calloused and steady, the hands of a man who has built homes and watched them burn. Solly is a name that will echo through Cherokee memory like a war drum, but tonight he is simply a teacher. Across from him sits a young man named Moses, 23 years old, born in chains on a plantation outside Knoxville, escaped 3 months ago with nothing but a stolen knife and a will that refused to break. Moses has the build of someone who has known labor since childhood, muscles carved from cotton fields and beatings, but his eyes are hungry for something other than survival. He wants retribution, and Solly sees it. Just sees it and knows how to shape it. Around them, a dozen others sit in the circle. Cherokee men who refused the soldiers' orders, who melted into the wilderness like smoke, and former slaves who risked everything to reach these mountains. They speak in low tones, a mixture of Cherokee, English, and the silent language of the oppressed. There is no formal ceremony here, no speeches or declarations. This is practical. This is war college in the dirt. Solly gestures to a long piece of wood carved into the shape of a rifle. You hold it like this, he says in English, slow and deliberate, not because it is heavy, but because your hands must know it in the dark, in the rain. When you cannot see, Moses lifts the wooden mock weapon, adjusts his grip. Solly nods. The soldiers, the slavers, they expect you to run, they expect you to hide. That is your first weapon, their expectation. You are already a ghost to them. Jests. Now you must become the kind of ghost that kills. Firelight flickers across their faces. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. The mountain listens. The dead watch. And the men in this circle, they are building something that history will try and fail to bury. 2 miles south of the fire, down a ravine thick with laurel and rhododendron, a plantation owner named Colonel Thaddeus Mercer sleeps in a bed worth more than the lives of 50 men. His estate sprawls across stolen Cherokee land, purchased for pennies after the Treaty of Nuakata, a document signed by a handful of Cherokee who did not speak for the nation, a piece of paper that damned thousands. Mercer is a man of commerce and cruelty, a dealer in cotton and human flesh, a pillar of what the white settlements call civilization. He owned 63 slaves, owned 64 until Moses vanished in August. Mercer sent dogs after him, sent hunters, sent bounties rippling through the county like poison in water. But Moses did not surface. He disappeared as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole, and it had. The Cherokee had. Now Mercer lies in his bed, drunk on bourbon and self-satisfaction, while his overseers patrol the grounds with rifles and lanterns, while his slaves sleep in cabins with dirt floors and walls that cannot keep out the cold. Jests. He does not know that his name has been spoken around the fire in the mountains. He does not know that Moses has drawn his face in the dirt and described the layout of the plantation, the rotation of the guards, the place where Mercer keeps his guns. He does not know that Solly has listened with the patience of a man who has learned to turn rage into strategy. Mercer believes himself untouchable. He believes in the law, in the soldiers at the fort 10 miles east, in the power of whiteness and wealth to insulate him from consequence. He is wrong. But he will not learn this for another 6 days. For now he sleeps. His dogs sleep. Jests. His overseers drink whiskey and talk about women they have no right to touch. And in the mountains, in the circle of firelight, Moses is learning how to move through darkness without disturbing a single leaf. How to kill a man silently with a blade between the ribs. How to become the nightmare that visits men like Mercer in the small hours before dawn. The Cherokee have always known how to read the land. Jests. Long before the white men came with their maps and their fences, before they carved the earth into parcels and claimed ownership of what could never be owned. Just. The Cherokee moved through these mountains as if they were an extension of their own bodies. Every rock, every stream, every ridge and hollow had a name, a story, a purpose. The wilderness was not something to conquer. It was a language to speak, a relationship to honor. And now, in the autumn of 1838, as their nation is being torn apart and dragged westward in chains, the survivors are using that knowledge as a weapon. They teach Moses and the others how to navigate by the stars, suggest by the shape of moss on tree trunks, by the sound of water running underground. They teach them how to move uphill without leaving tracks, how to cross streams without disturbing the flow, just how to read the behavior of birds and know when soldiers are near. This is not the kind of training that happens in a week. It is brutal, relentless, and unforgiving. Moses wakes before dawn every day, his body aching from the previous day's lessons, and he is immediately sent into the forest with nothing but a knife and instructions to return with food, with information, with proof that he is learning. Sometimes he succeeds. Sometimes he fails. Suggests and Solly's disappointment is worse than any beating he ever received on the plantation. Because this is not about punishment. It is about survival, about transformation, about becoming something the enemy cannot predict or contain. There is a woman among them too. Her name is Aida, which means first to dance. In Cherokee, though there has been little dancing in her life for many years. She is 31, a widow. Her husband killed by soldiers during the first forced removals. She is small, sharp-eyed, and more dangerous than most of the men in the camp. Aida teaches the runaways how to use plants, which ones heal, which ones kill, which ones can be brewed into poisons that leave no trace. She teaches them how to set traps, how to create diversions, how to make a man believe he is being hunted by spirits rather than flesh and blood. Her voice is quiet, almost gentle, suggests, but her hands never stop moving, mixing, grinding, preparing. She lost everything to the same forces that enslaved Moses and the others, and now she is teaching them how to take everything back. There is a hierarchy of cruelty in the world of 1838, a ladder built on suffering where every rung is slick with blood. At the top are men like President Martin Van Buren, who signed the orders for removal with a pen that never trembled, who sent 16,000 Cherokee westward to die in the mud and cold because land was more valuable than lives, because manifest destiny was a doctrine that sanctified theft and called it progress. Below him are the generals, the officers, jests, the bureaucrats who translated cruelty into policy, who measured suffering in logistics and supply chains. Then come the soldiers, men who followed orders, who held rifles and bayonets, jests, who burned homes and dragged families from their land and told themselves they were just doing their duty. And below them, at the base of this pyramid of inhumanity, are men like Mercer and his kind. The plantation owners, the slave traders, suggests, the overseers who wielded whips and brands, who bought and sold human beings like livestock, who raped and murdered and justified it all with scripture and pseudoscience. These men are not abstractions, they are flesh. They bleed, suggests. And in the mountains, in the hidden camps where Cherokee warriors train escaped slaves, a philosophy is taking shape. If the system cannot be dismantled, then those who enforce it must be made to fear. This is not about justice in any legal sense. There is no justice for the Cherokee, no justice for the enslaved, not in the courts, not in the churches, not in the halls of power where white men debate the humanity of those they oppress. So justice must be taken. It must be carved out with knives and axes, with fire and blood, with the kind of vengeance that makes powerful men wake in the night and wonder if their locks are strong enough. if their guards are loyal enough, if the darkness beyond their windows holds something waiting. Sally understands this. He fought it at first, tried to believe in negotiation and peace, in the promises made by white officials. But promises are wind, treaties are lies. His brother was shot by a soldier during the removal. His sister died of fever on the march west before the family even made it 50 miles. He carries these deaths like stones in his chest, and he has decided that stones can be thrown. Moses understands it too. He remembers the auction block, the hands that inspected his teeth like he was a horse, the night his mother was sold away and he never saw her again. These memories are fuel, and fuel burns. By the third week of training, suggests Moses can move through the forest like water through stone, silent, inevitable, unseen. He has learned to control his breathing, to place his feet with the precision of a man walking on ice, just to become part of the landscape rather than an intruder within it. The other runaways are progressing too, each at their own pace, each carrying their own ghosts. There is Samuel, 40 years old, jests, who escaped from a plantation in northern Georgia with his son Jacob, a boy of 16 who watches everything with eyes too old for his face. There is Ruth, 28, who fled after her master tried to force himself on her one time too many, jests, who carries a scar across her cheek and a fury in her heart that could burn down cities. There is Caleb, who speaks little but moves with a grace that suggests he was born for this, suggests whose hands are steady and whose aim with a thrown knife is nearly perfect. They are not soldiers in any formal sense. They have no uniforms, no flags, no drums or bugles to announce their presence. But they are becoming something far more dangerous, ghosts with purpose, shadows with teeth. Sally watches them with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He knows what he is creating. He knows that most of these people will not live to see old age. That the path of resistance is paved with early graves and unmarked burial sites. But he also knows that some deaths mean more than others, that there is a difference between dying on your knees and dying on your feet, between being erased quietly and leaving a scar on the face of history that cannot be covered up. The Cherokee have their own traditions of warfare, rituals and songs, codes of honor that governed how battles were fought and how enemies were treated. But this is not traditional warfare. This is asymmetric, desperate, existential. The enemy has cannons and cavalry forts and supply lines, jests. The full weight of a government behind them. Sally and his people have knowledge, terrain, and the willingness to do what must be done without hesitation. They are teaching the runaways not just how to fight, but how to think like prey that has decided to become predator, how to use weakness as camouflage and strike when the enemy believes himself safe. Around the fire each night, they share stories, Cherokee legends of warriors and tricksters, jests, slave narratives of escape and survival, songs that carry coded messages about routes and safe houses. They are building more than a fighting force. They are building a mythology, a shared identity born from mutual suffering and mutual defiance. November 20th, 1838. 6 days have passed since we first sat by that fire, and the night has arrived. Moses stands at the edge of the forest, looking down at the Mercer plantation spread below like a miniature kingdom of sin. Suggests lanterns glow in the windows of the main house, warm and yellow, the kind of light that speaks of comfort and safety. Lies, both of them. The slave cabins are dark, their inhabitants locked in for the night. Chains on some doors because Mercer learned long ago that desperation makes men brave. 2 overseers patrol the grounds, their routes predictable, their attention dulled by routine and whiskey. Moses counts their steps, times their movements, suggests, watches the way they pause to light cigars and complain about the cold. He is not alone. Sally is beside him, crouched low, his presence so still he might be mistaken for stone. To Moses's left is Aida, her hand resting on a pouch of carefully prepared powders, some for sleep, some for pain, some for death. Behind them, hidden in the tree line, are Samuel and Caleb, Ruth and Jacob, suggests, and 3 Cherokee warriors whose names Moses has not yet earned the right to know. They are 9 in total. The plantation has 17 white men, if you count Mercer and his overseers and the guests currently drinking in his parlor. Jets. The mathematics are not in their favor, but mathematics assumes a fair fight, and nothing about tonight is fair. This is not a battle. This is an execution. Sally has planned it with the precision of a man who understands that chaos is only useful if you control it, that violence must be directed like water through a channel, or it drowns everyone, including yourself. The plan is simple. Suggest disable the overseers first silently so no alarm is raised. Free the slaves in the cabins, arm those who are willing to fight. Burn the cotton stores, Mercer's wealth made tangible, his power reduced to ash. And then, only then, enter the main house. Mercer will die tonight. Not quickly. Not mercifully. He will die knowing exactly why, knowing the face of the man he once owned, knowing that his guns and his dogs and his whiteness could not save him. Jests. Moses feels no hesitation, no moral conflict. He has spent weeks imagining this moment, refining it, sharpening it in his mind until it gleams like a blade. Sally places a hand on his shoulder, squeezes once, the signal. They move down the slope like shadows spilling from the mountain, and the night holds its breath. The first overseer dies without ever knowing he was in danger. His name was Garrett, suggests, a man from South Carolina with a reputation for cruelty that preceded him like a stench. He is the one who whipped Ruth until she couldn't stand, who broke Samuel's son's finger for the crime of looking him in the eyes. Caleb comes up behind him while he's urinating against the side of the barn, and the knife enters just below the base of the skull, severing the spinal cord before Garrett's brain can process that anything is wrong. Suggests he drops like a puppet with cut strings, his body crumpling into the dirt without a sound. Caleb drags him into the shadows, wipes the blade on Garrett's own shirt, and moves toward the second overseer. His name is Thomas, younger than Garrett, maybe 25, and he's the one Moses wants. Thomas was there the day Moses was whipped for trying to learn to read, was there when Moses' friend Daniel was sold off for talking back, was there and laughed. But Moses has orders, discipline, suggests control. This is not about personal vengeance, not yet. This is about the mission. Thomas is standing near the main house, rifle propped against his shoulder, eyes scanning the darkness but seeing nothing because he does not believe there is anything to see. Why would he? The slaves are locked up. The Cherokee are gone, driven west or dead. The world belongs to men like him, and it always will. Ruth approaches from his blind side, moving low and fast, and when she rises she has a hunting knife in her hand. Cherokee-made bone handle, edged like a whisper. She doesn't go for the kill immediately. She cuts the tendon in his right leg first, suggests, and Thomas goes down hard, mouth opening to scream. But Aida's already there, her hand clamping over his face, a cloth soaked in something sweet and chemical pressed against his nose and mouth. He struggles for 5 seconds, then 10. Then his eyes roll back and his body goes slack. They drag him into the barn and tie him with his own belt. He will wake later and he will wish he hadn't. The alarm has not been raised. The plantation sleeps on, ignorant and doomed. Moses and Sally move toward the slave cabins, keys taken from Garrett's corpse jangling softly in the dark. Inside those cabins, men and women lie awake, as they do every night, dreaming of freedom they believe will never come. Tonight, they are wrong. The first cabin door opens with a creak that sounds like thunder in the silence, but no one comes running, no bells are rung. Inside, 12 men lie on wooden pallets, some chained to the walls. Suggests some simply locked in because the threat of dogs and bullets is chain enough. Moses steps inside and every eye snaps to him, some wide with hope, some narrowed with suspicion, some simply exhausted beyond the capacity for emotion. He recognizes faces, men he worked beside in the fields, men he ate with, men who watched him disappear and assumed he was dead or worse. I am Moses, he says quietly, though they know him already. I left, I found help. Tonight we take what's ours. A man named Isaiah, older, scarred across his back from decades of whippings, shakes his head slowly. They'll kill us all. They'll bring soldiers. They'll do nothing. Moses interrupts, and his voice is iron. Because by the time anyone knows what happened here, we'll be gone and Mercer will be dead. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Dead, not escaped, not freed by law or mercy. Dead. Sally steps forward, jests, and the men see him clearly now, a Cherokee warrior, paint on his face, hatchet at his belt, eyes that have seen the end of worlds. You can come with us, Sally says in careful English. You can fight. Or you can stay here and wait for the next master to buy you. But decide now. There is no grand speech, no rousing call to arms. This is not a moment for theater. This is survival offering itself with bloody hands, suggests, and every man in that cabin knows it. Some rise immediately. Young men, angry men, men who've been waiting their entire lives for a door to open. Others hesitate, paralyzed by fear or caution or the weight of too many broken promises. Moses doesn't judge them. He remembers the terror of his own escape, the certainty that he would be caught, that the dogs would tear him apart, that freedom was a lie told to keep slaves obedient. But he also remembers the moment he chose to run anyway, the moment fear became irrelevant in the face of continued degradation. Isaiah finally stands, then another, by the time they move to the second cabin. 17 men have joined them and the number grows with each door unlocked. They arm themselves with tools, axes, hammers, scythes, anything with weight and edge. The slaves of the Mercer plantation are becoming something else. They are becoming an army. The cotton storehouse burns first. Aida and Ruth move through it like vengeful spirits, splashing oil across the bales, across the wooden beams, across everything that represents Mercer's wealth and power. The cotton is stacked high, full season's harvest, worth thousands of dollars, the product of stolen labor and broken bodies. When Ruth strikes the flint and the first flame catches, it spreads with an eagerness that feels almost alive, hungry, suggests righteous. Within minutes, the entire structure is engulfed, flames leaping 30 feet into the night sky, heat so intense it drives them back toward the tree line. The light wakes the plantation. Shouts erupt from the main house. A bell begins to ring, frantic and disorganized. Men stumble out onto the porch. Mercer's guests, plantation owners from neighboring estates, men in expensive clothes who came for dinner and cards and are now confronted with chaos. Mercer himself appears, still in his nightshirt, face red with fury and confusion, screaming orders that no one can hear over the roar of the fire. He's looking for his overseers, looking for Garrett and Thomas. Looking for someone to explain how this happened, how his property is burning, how the world is turned upside down. He doesn't see the figures moving in the shadows beyond the firelight, jests. Doesn't see Moses and the others positioned in a loose perimeter around the main house, weapons ready, faces set with the kind of calm that comes after a decision has been made and there is no going back. Mercer sends two of his guests running toward the slave cabins, perhaps thinking the fire was an accident, perhaps thinking his property needs to be secured. They make it 15 feet before Cherokee arrows cut them down. Not killing shots, jests. Not yet, but enough to drop them screaming into the dirt. Now Mercer understands. Now his face shifts from anger to something closer to terror, and he turns to run back inside, shouting for guns, for ammunition, for anything that can turn this nightmare back into the natural order he expects. But Solly is already moving. Samuel and Caleb are already moving. The newly freed slaves, 17 men who an hour ago were chained and hopeless, are already moving. They converge on the main house from 3 directions, and the door that Mercer tries to slam is kicked open before the lock can catch. Inside, jests, the screaming begins. Outside, the fire burns higher, turning night into day, and for miles around, people will see the glow and wonder what it means. They will learn soon enough, suggests they will learn that the world they built on suffering is not as stable as they believed. That vengeance, when it comes with interest. Mercer tries to make it to his study where he keeps a rifle and a pistol in a locked cabinet, but Moses is faster. Moses, who picked cotton under the burning sun until his hands bled. Moses, who was whipped for the crime of exhaustion. Moses, who watched men die in the fields and be replaced the next week like broken tools. He tackles Mercer in the hallway, and they go down hard, Mercer's head cracking against the polished wooden floor. Floor laid by slave hands, suggests, polished by slave labor paid for with slave suffering. Mercer swings wildly, catches Moses across the jaw, and for a moment they grapple like animals, all pretense of civilization stripped away, jests. But Moses has spent 3 weeks learning how to fight from men who have been fighting for survival their entire lives, and Mercer has spent his life believing his authority was armor enough. Moses gets on top of him, pens his arms, suggests, and looks down into the face of the man who owned him. "You don't remember me?" Moses says, breathing hard. "You bought me 4 years ago. You didn't even look at my face. I was livestock to you." Mercer's eyes are wide, desperate, suggests, searching Moses's face for mercy or humanity or some appeal that might work. "I'll pay you," he gasps. "Whatever you want. Money. Land. I have connections. I can get you papers. Freedom papers, legal." Moses hits him. Not with a weapon. Just his fist, and Mercer's nose breaks with a wet crack. "I have freedom," Moses says quietly. "I took it. You can't give me what I already own." Sally appears in the doorway, his hatchet dripping red. The guests who tried to fight are dead or dying. The house is being ransacked, not for valuables, though those will be taken, but for weapons, for supplies, for anything useful. Samuel is freeing the house slaves. 3 women who work in the kitchen and Mercer's chambers, women who have endured things that have no names in polite language. They emerge blinking and terrified and disbelieving, and Ruth takes them by the hands and leads them outside, jests, speaks to them in low urgent tones about choice and consequences and the fact that they are no longer prisoners. Jacob, Samuel's son, stands guard at the front door with a rifle taken from one of the dead guests, his young face carved into something ancient by firelight and necessity. The plantation is no longer Mercer's. It belongs to the flames now, and to the ghosts he created, and to the justice he never believed would come for him. They take Mercer outside, Drag him into the yard where the fire is at its peak, where the heat distorts the air and makes everything shimmer like a fever dream. The freed slaves gather in a semicircle, faces lit by flame, suggests, and Mercer kneels in the center like a supplicant before a god he doesn't believe in. He is weeping now, all his authority dissolved, all his power revealed as the illusion it always was. He begs, he offers everything he has. He invokes God and law and civilization, as if any of these concepts have ever protected the people standing over him. Solly steps forward and the crowd parts for him. He carries his hatchet, and his face is painted with ash and ochre, ceremonial, suggests deliberate. This is not random violence. This is ritual. This is the kind of justice that exists outside courtrooms and legislation, the kind that has been practiced since the first human decided that some wrongs were too great to forgive. You took our land, Sally says, his voice carrying over the crackle of flames. You took their bodies. You took their children. You built your comfort on our suffering, and you slept well at night because you believed you had the right. He pauses, looks around at the faces watching, Cherokee warriors who have lost everything, escaped slaves who bear the marks of his whips and chains, women who were violated in his house, men who were worked until their bodies broke. We are taking something back tonight, Solly continues. Not just your property, not just your life, we are taking back the fear. You have lived without fear for so long you forgot it existed. But we have lived with it every day. Fear of the whip, jests, fear of the rope, fear of being sold, fear of being removed, fear of existing in a world that hates us for breathing. Tonight, you learn what that fear tastes like. Mercer tries to speak, but Moses steps forward and strikes him silent. Jets, there is no dramatic monologue from Moses, no final words meant to carry meaning. He has said everything that needs saying. The hatchet rises and falls once, twice. The screams last only seconds. And then there is only the sound of fire consuming wood and fabric and the remnants of a false empire. Some of the freed slaves turn away, unable to watch, their humanity intact despite everything done to strip it from them. Jests. Others watch with faces like stone bearing witness, remembering Mercer's body is left where it falls. The mountain does not mourn him. The night does not pause. The world turns indifferent to one more act of violence in a century built on blood. Suggests stop for a moment. Let that image settle. A plantation burning, a master dead in the dirt, slaves who were property an hour ago now standing as free men and women, weapons in their hands, firelight in their eyes. This is the history they don't teach because it's too dangerous, because it suggests that power can be taken and not just granted, suggests, because it reveals that the oppressed have always had the capacity to fight back. They were simply waiting for the moment, the means, the alliance. If this story matters to you, if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, then subscribe, suggests. Hit that button. Share this with someone who needs to know that resistance has always existed, that our ancestors were not passive victims, but warriors and strategists. Drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever heard this story before. Suggests if your school ever mentioned the alliance between Cherokee warriors and escaped slaves, because silence is how they erase us, and we refuse to be erased. Now let's see what happens next when the fire burns out and the reckoning spreads. By dawn, suggests they are gone. The plantation smolders, blackened beams jutting from the ruins like broken ribs, smoke rising in thick columns that can be seen for 10 miles in every direction. The main house is a gutted shell. The cotton storehouse is ash. Mercer's body lies in the yard, covered by morning dew and blood, already being investigated by crows. The survivors, if you can call them that, the house slaves who were too terrified to join, the field hands who chose to stay rather than risk the wilderness, wander through the wreckage in a daze, trying to understand what has happened, what it means, what comes next, jests. Some will eventually make their way to neighboring plantations and tell the story in whispered fragments. Others will simply disappear into the chaos of a region that is already fractured by forced removal and resistance. But Moses and the others are miles away by the time the sun fully rises, moving through the mountains with the kind of efficiency that comes from expert guidance. Solly leads them along paths that don't appear on any map, jests through ravines and over ridges that only the Cherokee know, places where horses cannot follow, where dogs lose the scent in the streams and rocky ground. They travel in silence for the most part, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in their bodies, jests, the weight of what they've done settling like sediment in their minds. Some are elated. Jacob grins like he's been reborn. Ruth walks with her head high for the first time in years. Others are somber. Samuel keeps looking back as if expecting pursuit. Isaiah moves mechanically, still processing the fact that he is no longer property. They stop briefly at a creek to drink and rest, and Sally gathers them together. Jez, what we did last night will spread, he says. Other plantations will hear, other slaves will hear, other Cherokee will hear. Some will be inspired, some will try the same, and the white men will respond with fury. More soldiers, more dogs, suggests more laws, more violence. This is not over. This is just beginning. Moses nods understanding. He killed a man last night, watched him die. Felt nothing but a cold satisfaction that he knows should probably disturb him but doesn't. He has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, become something that the law will hunt until he is captured or killed. But he is also free in a way that has nothing to do with papers or permissions. He has taken his life back with his own hands. And that, he realizes, is worth whatever comes next. The news reaches the military fort by mid-morning. A rider, one of Mercer's neighbors, gallops in with wild eyes and a story that sounds like fiction. Plantation burned, owner murdered. Slaves vanished, evidence of Cherokee involvement. Major William Garrett, no relation to the dead overseer, though the coincidence will haunt him later, listens with a face carved from granite. He is a career military man, a veteran of the Seminole Wars, a man who has built his reputation on putting down resistance and maintaining order in territories that refuse to be orderly. He has been part of the Cherokee removal operation, has overseen the forced marches, suggests has signed off on the logistics of ethnic cleansing while calling it policy. And now this, an act of coordinated violence that suggests organization, planning alliance between groups that should, in his mind, be too broken to resist. He immediately dispatches riders to other forts, to the state capital, to every plantation within 50 miles. The message is clear: heightened security, armed patrols, shoot on sight any Cherokee or runaway slaves. Crush this before it spreads like wildfire through a territory already on the edge of chaos. He assembles a hunting party, 30 soldiers, twice that many civilian volunteers, men who own slaves or land or both. Men who understand that what happened at Mercer's plantation is not just murder but insurrection. Not just crime but revolution. They are given supplies for 2 weeks, tracking dogs bred for hunting human beings, maps of the region, suggests, and a single directive: bring back bodies or don't come back at all. Major Garrett knows the terrain favors the fugitives, knows the Cherokee have been living in these mountains since before his grandparents were born, jests, knows that escaped slaves are motivated by a desperation that makes them dangerous in ways soldiers cannot match. But he also knows that he has numbers, resources, the authority of the federal government, and the certainty that comes from believing your cause is righteous. He has never questioned whether the removal is just, whether slavery is moral, whether the system he enforces is built on foundations of cruelty. Suggests these are not questions a soldier asks. A soldier follows orders. A soldier maintains civilization against the chaos of savages and criminals, jests. And that is exactly how he sees Sally and Moses and everyone with them. Not as human beings responding to inhuman conditions, but as threats to be eliminated. The hunting party rides out at noon, jests, and the mountains watch them come with the indifference of stone that has seen 1,000 armies pass and crumble into dust. 3 days into the pursuit, the soldiers lose their first man. His name is Private Henry Collins, 19 years old, jests. From Virginia, a boy who joined the military because his family farm failed and he needed the pay. He is walking point, rifle ready, eyes scanning the forest ahead, when the ground beneath him simply disappears. He falls 12 feet into a pit lined with sharpened stakes, Cherokee trap, old design, newly repurposed, and his screams echo through the trees until someone has the mercy to silence him with laudanum. They pull his body out, jests, but he dies an hour later from blood loss and punctured organs, and the hunting party suddenly understands that they are not chasing frightened refugees, but trained fighters who know this terrain in ways they never will. The dogs are next, jests. That night, while the soldiers make camp in a clearing they believe is defensible, the dogs begin to die, quietly without warning, frothing at the mouth from poisoned meat left along the perimeter. Aida's work. By morning, just 8 of the 12 tracking dogs are dead, and the remaining 4 are too terrified to be useful, cowering at their handlers' feet and refusing to move. Major Garrett orders the camp struck and the march continued, but morale is fracturing. The civilian volunteers, men who came expecting a quick hunt and an easy kill, are beginning to understand that they are outmatched. 2 of them desert in the night, slipping away while the guards are distracted, preferring the shame of cowardice to the certainty of death in these mountains. The soldiers press on, driven by duty and the fear of what failure means for their careers, for their reputations, for the fragile order they represent. But they are being watched. Sali and his warriors shadow them from the ridges, never engaging directly, never giving them a target, simply observing, waiting, letting the wilderness do most of the work. Moses watches too, jests, learning this new form of warfare, patience as weapon, terrain as ally, the art of making an enemy defeat himself through exhaustion and paranoia. The hunting party moves deeper into the mountains, following false trails and ghost signs. Jests, chasing shadows while the real fugitives circle behind them, stealing supplies, sabotaging equipment, leaving messages carved into trees in Cherokee script that the soldiers cannot read but understand perfectly. You do not belong here. Suggests, these mountains will kill you, turn back while you still can. But soldiers do not turn back, orders do not allow for retreat, and so the hunt continues, just spiraling toward an inevitable confrontation that both sides know is coming but only one side is prepared for. November 28, 1838, 2 weeks after the Mercer plantation burned, the confrontation happens in a narrow canyon, suggests walls of limestone rising on both sides, a place the Cherokee call the throat, because it swallows those who enter without permission. Major Garrett's hunting party has been reduced to 18 soldiers and 5 volunteers. The rest dead, just deserted, or too injured to continue. They are exhausted, low on supplies, operating on rage and desperation more than strategy. They enter the canyon at midday, and that is their first mistake. Their second mistake is believing they are still the hunters. Sali and his warriors are positioned on the ridges above, invisible against the rock, bows ready, rifles taken from dead soldiers loaded and aimed. Moses is among them, his heart steady, his hands calm, a transformation so complete he barely recognizes himself as the man who picked cotton 2 months ago. Below, the soldiers advance in a tight column, weapons ready, eyes scanning the forest floor for traps. They do not think to look up. The first volley comes without warning, arrows and rifle fire from above, a coordinated strike that drops 6 men before they can react. The soldiers scramble for cover, returning fire blindly at the ridges. Bullets ricocheting off stone, hitting nothing but air and rock. Major Garrett screams orders, trying to organize a retreat, but the canyon is a killing box and they are trapped in the center of it. A second volley, a third. The soldiers break, running for the canyon entrance, abandoning formation, abandoning their wounded, abandoning everything except the primal need to survive. Some make it out, some don't. Major Garrett is among those who fall, a Cherokee arrow through his throat, jests, his body collapsing into the creek that runs through the canyon floor, his blood mixing with the water and flowing downstream toward the settlements that sent him. The battle, if it can be called that, lasts less than 10 minutes. When it's over, 12 soldiers are dead, the rest are scattered and running, and the fugitives have won a victory that will be remembered in whispers and warnings for generations. But Sali knows what comes next, jests, knows that this victory will bring a response 10 times more brutal, that the federal government cannot allow this kind of resistance to stand, that every Cherokee still hiding in these mountains has just become a target. He gathers his warriors and the freed slaves, and he tells them the truth: we have struck a blow, but the cost will be terrible. Some of us will not survive what comes next. Choose now, stay and fight, suggest, or scatter and try to reach the territories where Cherokee have already been forced. There is no judgment either way. You have already done more than most ever will. Moses doesn't hesitate. I stay, he says. Others echo him. They have tasted freedom and vengeance, and they will not go back to chains or hiding. They will fight until they cannot fight anymore. December 3, 1838. 5 days after the Canyon Massacre, the federal response arrives with the cold efficiency of an empire that will not tolerate defiance. 3 companies of regular army troops, nearly 200 men, accompanied by artillery, supply wagons, and a mandate signed by the governor himself, pacify the region by any means necessary. They do not march into the mountains, they surround them. Every pass, every trail, every route of escape is blocked. They burn the forest systematically, suggest smoking out anyone hiding in the caves and hollows. They offer amnesty to any Cherokee who surrenders, and death to any who resist. They capture families, hold them hostage, demand that Sali and his warriors turn themselves in or watch innocents die. And Sali knows the mathematics of survival, knows that if he continues to fight, the entire remnant of Cherokee still free in these mountains will be exterminated. Jests knows that martyrdom is sometimes the only victory available to the defeated. On December 5th, he walks into the military camp alone, hands empty, head high. Moses tries to stop him, argues that they can still fight, still run, still find a way. But Sali places a hand on his shoulder and speaks the truth that Moses is not yet old enough to understand. Some battles are won by dying well. My people need to survive. If my death buys them time, buys them mercy, jests, then it is a price I pay gladly. You keep fighting, Moses. You and the others go north, follow the routes we discussed, find the abolitionists in Pennsylvania, tell them what happened here. Tell them that we did not go quietly. Tell them that the alliance between Cherokee and the enslaved is real, that we bled together and won together, and that no government can erase that. Moses weeps, the first tears he shed since childhood, and Sally embraces him once, then walks toward the soldiers. They execute him 3 days later, along with 2 of his warriors who surrendered with him. The military declares the insurrection over. The remaining fugitives scatter, some north, some deeper into the wilderness, some captured and returned to the nightmare they tried to escape. Moses makes it to Pennsylvania by spring, carrying Sally's story like a sacred text, telling it in abolitionist meetings and slave churches, adding fuel to a fire that will eventually consume the nation in civil war. The Mercer plantation is never rebuilt. The land sits empty, cursed by rumor, avoided by settlers who claim to hear screams on the wind and see fires that aren't there, jests. And in the mountains, among the Cherokee who remain and the descendants of those who fled, the story of Sally and Moses becomes legend, a whispered reminder that resistance is always possible, that alliances between the oppressed can shake empires, that some fires once lit can never truly be extinguished. They tried to bury this story. But you cannot bury what refuses to die. You cannot silence what echoes through generations. The fire on that November night in 1838 still burns, streaks in every act of defiance, in every alliance between the marginalized, in every person who looks at injustice and decides that submission is not survival. It is slow death. Sally and Moses and Aida and all the others, they chose to live on their feet rather than die on their knees. And that choice, that defiance, that unholy alliance between Cherokee warriors and escaped slaves, it is the story empires fear most. Because it proves that the oppressed have always had the power. They were simply waiting for the moment to use it.